All right, today was not the day. I should just let it go wild. I'm home, right? Today was not the day to wear a long sleeve shirt, but yeah, so I just got back from class. I got about a week left in the semester. Been thinking about a lot of stuff recently. So when I first started my coding journey back in 2023, I think it was a month before ChatGPT came out. So not much. I'm basically an AI baby, right? I've never known the landscape of code intimately before AI. AI, it's completely changed everything. That being said, I was listening to a lot of advice on YouTube at the time. One of the videos that struck me, I was learning code on my own in 2023, by the way. I was working for a startup at the time. And I was just learning stuff on my own, trying the best I could. And one of the pieces of advice I got at the time was to read, you need to be reading like 8 times as much code as you write. And you know what? We need some more light. That's better. So, you need to be reading 8 times as much code as you write. So that means like documentation, open source stuff, stuff like that. And at the time, I tried that and just like, it did not, I had zero comprehension of anything I was reading, right? Because like I'm just a little code baby. I just started and I knew absolutely nothing. And so I kind of blew off that advice for a while. Now, fast forward 2 years later, I'm a year into a college program where I've taken several classes with programming and stuff. And I'm starting to come back around to that advice that I'd received, that I had found about two years ago. I'm starting to read like lots and lots and lots of documentation. And I think the reason is I'm able to do that because I learned my ABCs, I think in this degree, in this line of work, whether you're going to college or not, which nowadays with how saturated the market is, you probably need a degree to get in. That's the conclusion I came to at the end of 2023. Is there's no way you get in anymore without a degree. The AI completely changed the landscape. There's a huge lack of programmers. We were just desperate for programmers. And now, now everybody's trying to be replaced, but I think it'll swing back around. I don't think AI is going to be what people say it is, but that's a topic for a different video. In this case, I've been learning my ABCs in programming for about a year, just baby stuff, really. Level 100, level 200 classes. And I'm starting to get to the point where the explanations and the examples in my classes are no longer sufficient for a full breadth of knowledge on the example. So an example of this is there's a class I'm taking where we're doing a lot of C#. We're doing a lot of data structures in C#. And in that, you use a lot of built-in C# methods and functions. Near the end of the semester here now, I'm working on final stuff, wrapping up, and I realized that my retention of a lot of the methods that we had discussed previously in class had diminished a lot. And so I found myself going to the Microsoft C# documentation on these methods like linked lists and, binary search trees and stuff like that. And I actually found the documentation was pretty good. And I was like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. And so I started looking at documentation for a lot of stuff. And I was like, wow, documentation's amazing. You get the explanation for everything, basically. And so, yeah, I've kind of come full circle on that. I started out, documentation I don't think is as useful for you in the very, very beginning, because you're just learning your ABCs. You're not going to be able to read Mark Twain in kindergarten, right? You need to learn what a variable is. You need to learn how a function works and stuff like that. What classes are and object-oriented programming. Once you start getting your ABCs down, once you start really digging a little deeper into creating tests for your test cases for your programs and quality assurance stuff, multi-file complex programs that you're connected to a database or something. You should go back. You should start reading the official documentation on a lot of these programming languages you're in. Now, I know this probably seems very duh, obviously, you're so stupid, I know. But maybe there's people out there who are beginners like me and heard that advice and tried it and were like, I can't do this. Well, if you're a little farther along in your coding journey, go back, try it again. I think you'll be surprised at how much you can get out of documentation. Straight from the horse's mouth, as they say, right? I don't know. And I say this specifically because there's probably a lot of programming majors out there like me who often go to ChatGPT for explanations on hey, how does this work? What is this from? GPT, it'll give you, its approximation. It'll draw from documentation sources. But GPT didn't write that code, right? C# was written by Microsoft. Now, the caveat is if you go to a documentation source and the documentation is terrible, yeah, then go to GPT and be like, hey, I'm trying to read through this documentation. I'm not really understanding it. For a lot of newer programming languages like Rust, GPT has no idea what it's talking about. None of the AI do, because it's so new. Now, that was the case maybe 6 months ago. I don't know what it's like now. You're going to do a lot better with newer technologies, just reading the direct documentation, reading forum notes and stuff from real people. Kind of like, anybody remember Stack Overflow? That ancient technology from back in the day. It's kind of like that. That is where you tend to be better off with the original source. You tend to be better off with the original source anyways. They're the ones who wrote the code. But yeah, I feel like I've talked that to death. Yeah, that was just something an epiphany I had recently. However, however naive it may be, documentation is great. Go read open source projects in that language. See if you can understand what the code's doing. Look for well-written code, code that doesn't have a bajillion abbreviations for their variables, and the variables are actually spelled out as words of what they actually mean. Look through documentation of open source projects. I would say, if you have the time, I know for a lot of college students like myself, I don't really have time, especially here at the end of the semester, trying to wrap up and stuff with finals. You don't have time to go and start studying this brand new open source documentation of a Python program or something. But that'll really help you start to understand the environment of both the language and the tech stack that is often associated with that language. I know Mern was popular for a while. I don't know if it's still popular like it was. There's a few other tech stacks where you use like what, something DB, MongoDB. I don't remember. It's been like 2 years since I looked at that stuff. But you know, if you're looking at stuff like that, you can check out, you know, their source code, and yeah, I don't know. That's basically what I have. I think after you do that, after you really start to get an understanding of the language, take a project and refactor it. I think taking an existing project and refactoring it, like if there's a project that uses an array in its code, take it and be like, can we refactor this into a linked list or into a binary search tree or something like that? That's actually one of my finals this semester. We're refactoring code, like 3 iterations in, we change it into different data structures. And then once you get really good at refactoring, I feel like that's when you start building those nice personal projects, and you have all the basics covered. You have your ABCs, you know, you understand the basics of programming, your variables, your algorithms and stuff. You understand how to read documentation, and then you can refactor code. If you can do those 3 things, and you can test and debug code, debugging, another big thing, you can build anything with enough time and enough grit. However, if you're lacking in any of those areas, you can be like me, where early on in your career, you tried to build all these projects and you stopped like 20% in, 20% of the way in, because you don't know how to read the documentation for this fancy new technology you want to use, or you don't know what's going wrong in your code and you don't know how to debug it. Once you get those stuff down, like personal projects, you can just start pumping them out, especially with help with things like Cursor AI. You can use it to build a lot of full stack applications really fast for personal projects. Now, make sure you cite the fact that you used it if you're putting it on your resume or something. But just doing that, even like pump out 10, 20 personal projects in the same amount of time that it could have taken you to make one project just by yourself. Anyways, that's all I got today. I don't really know what I'm going to title this, but that's just some stuff I've been thinking about in the coding world. I'll catch you guys later.